Hello, everybody, and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm T.
And I'm Blondie, and it's Grimbits a Coal Month.
Woohoo!
Yay! And this week, we would like to give a shout out to another country and city. The country we'd like to shout out to is Switzerland. Danke! Now, if I said that correctly, I'm saying thank you.
And if you didn't, it's gibberish.
My apologies.
And the city we want to shout out is close to home, Riverside County, California. Woohoo! Thanks, neighbors. And this week, before we get started, we had promised you guys an update on Sarah Boone. She's the convicted murderer in our She Dozed While He Decomposed episode about the suitcase killer. So she was actually convicted and found guilty of second-degree murder on October 25th, 4 years after investigators alleged that she zipped her boyfriend, George Torres, inside a suitcase and left him to die.
I can't believe it takes 4 years, or it took 4 years.
I know, so long.
It sounded like a slam dunk, literally.
Yeah, and she's filing a motion claiming that the court erred by denying her the right to a court-appointed attorney.
Do you want to explain why we're laughing?
We're laughing because she went through 7 court-appointed attorneys before attorney James Owens took her case. Sarah thinks they should have declared a mistrial following an emotional outburst by Torres's family in the jury's presence prior to deliberations. But you know what? What did she think was going to happen? They're all just going to sit there. Nobody's going to say anything after she freaking killed the guy and hit him with a baseball bat while he was in a suitcase? I mean,
True. Now, Torres was the gentleman that she zipped in the suitcase.
Right. Her 42-year-old boyfriend at the time.
So, of course, yes, they're going to have an emotional outburst in the courtroom.
Of course. She killed him with malicious intent. And it was horrifying to watch the video that she made. So anyway, if you guys are interested in all these details, go back and listen to our episode. But we did want to update everybody. Yes, she is convicted and found guilty of second-degree murder. Woohoo!
Well, I guess she didn't plan it. So, okay, I get second.
They're saying she was drunk and all of that. So second is better than nothing.
I agree. Didn't she fire all of her court-appointed attorneys?
Every one of them. She made up excuses for why each and every one of them didn't quite work for her. And then she complained that she had to go get her own attorney. She was just trying to drag it out and drag it out and drag it out. But, you know, enough is enough. I'm glad one of the judges finally put an end to that.
So there's your 4 years.
There you go. Would have been much quicker without her nonsense. She's ridiculous.
In so many ways. Well, thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
I was waiting patiently for that.
I'm sure everybody was. So there it is.
So, T, do you remember the cabin that my family used to have in the mountains?
I sure do. It was scary to be there by ourselves, but it was an awesome cabin.
It was awesome during the day.
It was, right. But at night, all the creeps came out.
And there probably wasn't any creeps. We just had it in our heads.
Well, we were young and full of imagination.
We used to go up there almost every weekend. Well, when we first got the cabin, we'd go up there and hang out almost every weekend. In the summer, we'd go to the town. In the winter, we'd play in the snow and go skiing. It was a great time. So I totally understand the Tiede family when they named their cabin the Tiede Tranquility. Of course, their weather is a little more intense since they're in Utah, and ours was in the local mountains. But this story is about the Tiede family, which consists of Rolf and Kay, along with their girls, Lene, who was 20, and Trisha, who was 16 at the time. And they love to spend time in their mountain oasis in Oakley, Utah. They go up there to relax, enjoy nature, and celebrate special occasions and holidays. It was a place that was filled with memories and love.
You know, I think most people who grow up in the city would really appreciate a mountain oasis. So I totally get it.
And we loved ours. It was, like an hour and a half away?
Yeah, it was perfect.
And the whole family got together on the weekend, so it was nice. The Tiede cabin was set up in the mountain area, and in the winter, residents of the area could only access it by snowmobile. They would park their cars at the entrance of the road and then snowmobile up to their cabins. When I heard this, I kind of wondered, how did they get all their stuff from the car to the cabin, at least in the winter? I mean, how many freezing trips did it take?
I'm guessing they only needed food maybe on these snowy trips after getting everything up there when it wasn't snowing. That's what makes sense to me.
That makes total sense, actually. But on snowmobiles, I remember we would take bags and bags and bags of groceries, like we were moving in for the entire year and gonna face an apocalypse. So in my brain, that's what I was thinking. So the Tiedes decided to spend an extended Christmas holiday by coming up a few days before Christmas and staying a few days after. They were getting everything ready for Christmas. The tree was up, presents were wrapped and placed under the tree, and all the stockings were hung. A few days before the 25th, they needed to do a little more shopping. So on December 22nd, they all set out to go to town. Kay, Lene, and Grandma Beth headed down the snowy road to their car. Rolf and Tricia went down the mountain to a second car.
So how many were up there at this point in total?
So far, it was just the 5 of them.
Okay, all right.
Once they finished their shopping, the 5 of them headed back to the entrance of the snowy road to get back on their snowmobiles and head to the cabin. Kay, Lene, and Grandma arrived first. They had stuff they needed to bring in, but Lene ran in first because her hands were freezing and she wanted to warm them up before she started carrying anything in. When she got inside, she saw what she thought was a shadow or someone in gray quickly walking by the refrigerator area. She thought it might have been one of their cousins that possibly had arrived early and wanted to surprise everyone. Unfortunately, that was not the case. A man in a gray sweatshirt jumped out and pointed a gun at her. Right behind her, Kay walked in. A second man with glasses pointed a gun directly at Kay. Kay said what anybody would say. "What do you want? Why are you here? Take whatever you want." But right after she says this, the man just shot her.
Wow, he didn't waste any time, did he? Why was he so trigger happy?
I'm really unsure. I didn't find any reasoning in everything that I read and why they did that.
It's crazy.
Not realizing what had happened inside, Grandma walks into a terrible scene. The guy with the glasses shoots her in the head and she falls to the ground. What the heck? She just walked in. But can you imagine how scared and frightened Lene was? Not only was a man holding a gun on her, but another man just shot her mother and grandmother right in front of her.
I would be so terrified and traumatized. I mean, I can't even imagine what she was thinking.
I would be thinking I'm next.
Yeah, of course.
Still shocked, she then realizes that her dad and sister will be arriving shortly. Sweatshirt guy grabs Lene and puts the gun in her back, so all she could do was sit there and wait. Rolf and Tricia pull into the garage, and a man comes out in a ski mask holding a gun. Rolf looked at Lene and could see the tears in her eyes. He immediately knew something awful had happened. The man asked if Rolf had any money. He reached into his pockets, grabbed everything that he had, and just started throwing it on the ground, saying, "Just take everything." But that wasn't enough for these cruel men. Sweatshirt guy tells Glasses guy to shoot Rolf while he was tying up Lene. He pointed the gun at Rolf and pulled the hammer back. Then he refused to fire, which I thought was kind of strange. It's like you're going to go that far and he stops himself.
Weird.
The two switched places and the sweatshirt guy pulled out a gun and pointed it at Rolf. He pulled the trigger and it clicked, but nothing happened. He fired again. Still nothing happened. Then he fired a third time and that one went off. This is just awful. To kill your mother, grandmother, and father right in front of you, there's got to be a special place in hell for these guys.
They're completely ruthless. And you know what? If I had tried to shoot somebody twice and it didn't work out, I would feel like that's a sign. No, seriously.
I thought you didn't believe in those.
Well, I mean, I don't believe in superstitions, but that's definitely a sign.
Someone's holding something over you.
Over you or them. I wouldn't want to mess with that.
True. I didn't think of it that way. Lene, Tricia, and the two men went back into the house. And what was strange was, while everyone was gone shopping, these guys had just made themselves at home. They opened up all the presents, they made themselves some food, and just had a jolly old time waiting for them to come back. Authorities thought that the men saw the family leave and waited for them to return.
Well, that's the downside of cabin life. You know, people are not usually close by and you can be easily isolated. It makes for perfect victims, unfortunately.
I completely agree. And, you asked me why they just decided to shoot them. They had been basically laying in wait for the family to come home.
Right.
And so I wonder if they had just gotten themselves all amped up. They weren't going to be surprised that they showed up and they accidentally killed them. Everything they were doing got themselves excited.
Maybe.
Since the men were inside the cabin just living it up, besides making a huge mess, their fingerprints were all over the cabin. So the two men decided to destroy the evidence. They took the gas cans from the garage that the Tiedes used to fill up the snowmobiles and poured gas everywhere. They told the girls to pack up the stuff that the men wanted to take with them from the house and the Christmas presents. The men then set fire to the top floor of the cabin and took off on the snowmobiles with the girls driving.
That's really interesting that they made the girls drive the snowmobiles. It's almost like they gave them the reins, which gave them a little bit of control.
Yes and no. I mean, if they are driving, then the girls could just jump off the back. But if the girls are driving, they can be behind them with their guns pointed in their backs. They're not going to do anything stupid.
I'm sorry. I would have whipped, what's it called? Fishtailed into a tree. I'm serious. Like, your brain has to go to those crazy places. Like, what am I going to do? All I can do is fishtail this guy off me.
Or they just didn't know how to drive snowmobiles.
Yeah, that could be true too.
When they got to the bottom of the road where the entrance was, they saw Randy Zorn, Lene and Trisha's uncle. He had just arrived and was going to head to the cabin. The sisters just drove past him and didn't even acknowledge or look at him.
So they were both pretty smart enough not to show any signs of recognition, knowing he could potentially be hurt as well. I'm amazed that they both did that without being able to communicate with each other in the moment or planning that ahead of time. It was very intuitive.
I thought the same thing. Good for them.
I know. Good for them.
Randy thought that it was strange, but figured they were teenagers and the guys on the back of the snowmobiles were their boyfriends. He's like, whatever, it's that teenage crap. At a nearby parking lot, the men forced Lene and Trisha off the snowmobiles. The men put the guns in the trunk of the family car. After, one of them showed the girls a knife that he had and said, quote, "Don't worry, I'm just as good with the knife as I am with the gun," end quote. He should have added, "and I'm evil, cold-hearted, and dead inside."
Oh, I think they already knew that part. They had that figured out.
He didn't have to be told.
No, freaking animals.
As the four of them drive away, they see Randy again, and he tries to wave them down, trying to get them to stop. But again, the girls don't acknowledge him and just ignore him. I'm sure they were thinking that if they acknowledged him, that the men would probably shoot him as well. But this time, Randy is really thinking that something could be wrong.
And good for him catching on, because I can see why he could have easily just brushed that off as the girls are just having fun and didn't see me.
They want to be cool and don't acknowledge their old uncle.
Exactly.
Less than a minute later, he saw something coming toward him on a snowmobile. This guy wasn't wearing any winter clothes, no gloves or helmet, but he noticed that he was bleeding. He said this man's face was swollen and his eyes were almost closed shut. He wondered, who the heck is this? And what happened? Then he realized this is his brother. His face is full of blood and huge. He even said that because it was so cold, he had blood sickles. I guess the men never checked to see if he was actually dead. Rolf had played dead after they shot him. I get it, and I'm sure Rolf was probably in shock or passed out, but these poor girls thinking their entire family is dead.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, so much has happened and it's just hard to be happy about anything right now. I mean, it's just so tragic.
And it seems like it happened so quickly.
It does. It really does. I'm surprised they're able to comprehend anything at this point.
Rolf tells him what's going on. His wife and mother-in-law have been killed. He's been shot, and his girls have been kidnapped. Randy begins to panic because he's got his brother in front of him who is bleeding and needs immediate medical attention, and his nieces are in a car that just drove by him. I mean, really, what do you do first?
Panic. That's exactly what you do.
Now remember, they're in the mountains, so cell service is either non-existent or spotty. Randy puts Ralph in the back seat, gets in his car, and starts to chase after the girls. In the meantime, they're trying to call 911 but can't get through, and Ralph is freaking out about his girls. Rolf, he is one tough cookie. He's shot in the face and bleeding, but has enough strength to get up and chase after his girls.
That's what daddies are supposed to do, protect their kids at any cost.
Well, he's definitely one of those good ones.
He sure is.
Heading down the canyon and still trying to call 911, Randy finally gets through. He explains to the police what's going on, about where the girls were, and the make and model of the car. And then he tells them about his brother. He's in the backseat needing immediate medical attention. And right after he gets all of that out, the call drops. So Randy pulls into a gas station to call 911 again. I don't know how the girls did this, but they stayed calm even though they were scared. But then all of a sudden they notice a police car passing. It turns around and starts to follow them. The men begin to panic. They drove for about another mile, eluding roadblocks and driving at high rates of speed, when all of a sudden, the car fell off an embankment. After it stopped, the car was at an angle, and on the road above them were police officers with their pistols and shotguns pointed at the car. Lene didn't think that they knew she and her sister were hostages, so she's yelling at them, "It's me and my little sister." Lene reaches for Trisha, grabs her hand, and tells her to duck. I understand why she thought that. She figured everyone was gone and no one knew about what had happened at the cabin. She didn't know about her dad still being alive.
Wow, this is an incredible story.
Well, the girls and the father are definitely, amazing.
They're superheroes.
These evil men, who were all tough before, basically just surrender and are placed under arrest. Fortunately, not too long after that, a helicopter arrived and took Rolf to the hospital, who was in critical condition at this point. He made it to the hospital and did survive. Come to find out, shooting him wasn't enough. They also doused him with gasoline and set him on fire. He made it into the house, got into the shower to put the fire out, and removed his gas-soaked snow vest. Then he got on the snowmobile, drove down the road, and that's when he ran into his brother. Again, I say he's one tough cookie.
And I can't believe they set him on fire. What is wrong with people?
Police go to the cabin that was set on fire not too long before. A police officer went through the house and said, quote, "I picked up a faint smell. It was kind of like burnt hair and maybe burnt fabric. As I entered the garage, there was a 12 to 18-inch puddle of blood that was fresh. As I started up the stairwell, I could see holes in the walls, bullet holes coming from one wall across the stairwell into another wall. I actually walked into the smoke before I really realized that the top floor of the cabin was on fire." End quote.
So that seems a little odd that he didn't notice, but maybe they had it, all tightly closed off. I'm talking about the cabin to keep them warm, and it kept the fire from spreading too fast.
I don't know. And I don't know why they started on the top. I thought that it all went up. So, if you're going to try and burn it, wouldn't you burn it from the bottom up?
I would think most people would think that too.
So they started actually at the top. And it was also kind of like at a point. The roof line came to a point. So maybe that kept it somewhat contained.
Like an A-frame.
I don't know. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know a lot about fires, but that's definitely not the way to do it.
The police officer's first priority was rescuing anyone that was in the cabin that needed assistance. Kay and Grandma weren't inside the cabin. The men had dragged them across the floor out to the deck and cowardly covered them with a blanket, probably thinking that would hide them. When investigators went in, it was a very bloody crime scene. There was so much blood that it drenched the carpet and made its way through the wood planks of the floorboards and formed red icicles where it had leaked through.
Okay, that whole description just sounds so unsettling.
And I saw pictures of it. It was very sad.
Oh.
Second priority was preserving evidence and protecting the victim's property. On top of the coffee table was a VCR camera and some tapes that were gathered. The ironic part about the VCR camera is that these two men actually recorded themselves in the house opening the family's presents, just like it was their own little Christmas. What is with criminals recording themselves? shouldn't that be don't do in the criminal handbook? Or is it just common sense that you don't do this?
Yeah, there should be criminality for dummies, and that should be on page 1. But don't we just love dumb criminals? I mean, it's the smart ones you got to watch out for, but the dumb ones are giving us so much content.
Like I said before, my police officer friend said we don't catch the smart ones.
Exactly.
So let's talk about these two heartless individuals. They're both in their mid-20s. One is named Edward Delly, who had been previously convicted of arson. The second, Vaughn Taylor, who had previously been convicted of aggravated burglary. Apparently, they decided to join forces, and those are the skills they brought to the table.
Wow.
They had been released from prison and lived in a halfway house. This is when you work on becoming a productive member of society, and you're required to go out and look for a job. I guess they didn't get the memo on what type of job to look for.
And they were unsupervised too. That's not very smart. So they just fell right back into what they did best. But this time they decided to add kidnapping to their set of skills. Good thing they ended up really sucking at that.
When they go from the halfway house, I know they have probation, or not probation. They have to be back by a certain time. They have curfews. I don't know if they're necessarily supervised.
I don't know much about it at all.
So they left the halfway house and ended up hitchhiking to the area of the Tiede cabin. One of them knew somebody who lived around there. They spent several days breaking into other cabins before they made it to the Tiede's cabin. They were looking to steal a car. And this is the super sad part about this. If all they really were looking for is a car or money, I'm sure the Tiedes would have handed it over without even thinking about it. Why did they have to go and shoot them?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like they had murdered before. I mean, at least not that we know of, but they were immediately comfortable with it, and on Christmas to boot.
Taylor and Delly had a total of 8 felonies against them. I mean, everything from murder to arson to a high-speed chase, robbery, attempted murder, and more. I actually thought that kidnapping was a federal offense.
I thought that was only if they crossed state lines, but I've never checked into it, to be honest with you.
You know what? You may be right on that.
I thought the federal only got involved because if 2 states were involved, it couldn't be one or the other.
That makes sense. The Tiede family was hoping for the death penalty, and I would too. I mean, they honestly have it coming.
I'm always in support of the death penalty when someone callously causes another person's death, especially if it's for monetary gain. Off with their heads.
Or bring in the big giant white gorilla?
Dang it, the silverback gorilla?
The silverback gorilla, right. 5 months later, a plea was struck with Vaughn Taylor. If he pled guilty to 2 counts of capital murder, they would drop all the other charges. Taylor also decided that instead of just getting a ruling from a judge, he wanted to go in front of a jury, so they had a trial. He testified, but he didn't do himself any favor. Showing no remorse, he was argumentative and had selective memory. He remembered pointing the gun, but he can't remember if he shot it. Quote, "It happened so quick, I don't remember," end quote, he testified.
If he doesn't have a rock solid story, I mean, it's not like he hasn't had time to come up with it, then why is he even testifying?
And how did he even think that whatever he could say, especially after they show the video, would make any difference?
Not smart, for sure.
He was found guilty of both counts of murder. They sentenced him to death for each count, so he was sentenced to death twice. I know the concept is ridiculous, but he totally deserved to die twice.
Well, yeah, because if they don't convict him for each death, it's like one will get justice and the other one doesn't.
Right. Why is one life more important than the other?
Right. The family, even though it's the same family in this situation, the family needs that.
I agree with you. Vaughn Taylor and Edward Delly were tried separately and at completely different times. Okay, now this is one of my favorite parts. It's time for Edward Delly's trial, and Rolf Tiede comes to court. The best part is, Delly had no idea that Rolf survived. He survived because he was shot with a bird gun, which I'm sure they stole from someone's cabin, And the ammunition for the bird gun is smaller pellets compared to, say, buckshot, which are larger pellets and cause more damage.
So were the women shot with a buckshot? Is that why they died?
They were shot with a handgun.
Oh, so buckshot's not part of the story.
No.
Oh, okay. You were just doing a
No,
comparison.
I was doing a comparison. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Now in court, Deli has to look in the eyes of the man that he shot. It also gave Rolf an opportunity to speak about what happened and what they did. Deli was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. One of the jurors was a holdout and didn't believe he deserved first-degree murder, which is a capital offense. So the rest of the jury compromised and went along with it because they realized a hung jury would mean that the family would have to relive it all over again if there was another trial. So both Lene and Trisha did testify, and from what I understand, it tore them up having to go through it all. Even though Deli isn't up for the death penalty, I think it was a good thing at the end of the day what the jury did.
Well, it's the quicker solution for the situation, but it definitely downplayed what he actually is guilty of. And that seems like a soft blow rather than the harsh punishment he deserved to be accountable for. But I get it. I think in that situation, they should have asked the family. I know they really can't communicate though, because maybe the family would have wanted to do it all over again to get what he deserved.
No, I understand that, but I also think you're right. They probably couldn't have gone to the family and said, hey, do you guys want to go through this traumatic experience all over again?
Yeah, they can't do that. I mean, but you know, in a perfect world, it would be up to the family. Like, we can't come to an agreement. You guys want to do this all over again? And if they say no, then you can come up with that verdict. If not, they should be able to go for it.
In a perfect world, if you shoot somebody for a malice reason, I think you should just poof, be gone.
I think they should be able to shoot you.
That's right.
I'm not playing. Whatever you do, have it done unto you.
Don't get me started.
I know.
Both Kay and Grandma Beth were laid to rest on the same day, 3 days after Christmas. Deli wrote a letter to Lene, which she did eventually read over time. I mean, like years. She did respond to him and sort of forgave him. I'm pretty sure that was for her own peace of mind, not for him. When you go through the trauma like that, you hold on to all this anger. And I imagine she just probably wanted to let it go.
That's what I keep hearing people do it for. I don't know that I could do it, but God bless them.
Von Taylor tried to appeal his sentence in January 2014, but it was rejected. His reasoning was that he didn't think he got a fair trial because 75% of the jury was Mormon. Well, dude, you're in Utah.
Duh.
As of 2023, Taylor has filed a fifth appeal to obtain a lesser sentence. He's still sitting on death row.
Well, I don't know what he's thinking, because I would have loved a Mormon jury. You know, a couple of my best friends growing up were Mormon, and they are extremely nice people for the most part. That's just my personal opinion.
I don't know if I have any Mormon friends that I know of.
Yeah, I had Mormon friends growing up in junior high and high school, and then I actually had a best friend that was a Mormon in elementary school. I don't know why.
Wow.
I'm just a Mormon magnet.
You're a magnet of something, I'm sure. A sad and a sweet note. Tough Cookie Rolf passed away from cancer in 2009. Man, if we cursed on this show, there would be a few choice words about cancer that I would be saying right about now. Little pent-up anger.
There's a lot of people saying some choice words about cancer. It's all over t-shirts and cups, if you haven't noticed.
I'm being good, for once.
I know.
Now the sweet part. After everything that has happened to the Tiede family, they didn't get rid of their cabin, but they actually redid it and use it to this day. They didn't want to let the tragedy define who they are and take away the happy memories that they have and continue to make. They feel their mom and grandma are still a presence in the cabin that they share with their children and entire family.
Wow. It's admirable. They're very strong people. I'm not sure I could or would want to do that, but they're right about not letting others contaminate their memories. Good for them.
Very strong, very formidable family, I will say that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing this story to us. That was a really incredible story. All right. We want to thank our listeners. Have fun, take care, and don't forget to let your gramaginations run wild. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, X at grimwitwithdimwits, Facebook grimwitwithdimwits, and YouTube grimwitwithdimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes, and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.